She said it with a smile. That's the part I keep coming back to. Not anger, not shouting. A smile. The kind you'd give a child who just tracked mud onto clean carpet. This house isn't yours anymore, Dad. It's time you understood that. I nodded. I said, "Okay, Amanda." And I went upstairs to my room, the room I built with my own hands 31 years ago. And I sat on the edge of my bed and I laughed. Quietly. Because in exactly 19 days, my daughter-in-law was going to find out something about this house that not even my son knew. If you've ever been made to feel like a guest in your own life, stay with me. Because this isn't a story about anger. It's a story about patience. And by the end of it, you'll understand why the quietest people in the room are usually the most dangerous. My name is Walter. I'm 67 years old, and for most of my life, I was the kind of man nobody worried about. Reliable, boring even. I worked 34 years as a structural engineer, the kind of job where nobody remembers your name, but everybody trusts your math. In 1994, my wife Diane and I bought 2 acres on the edge of town. Nothing special, just a slope of grass and a stand of oak trees. And over the next 3 years, mostly on weekends, I built this house myself. Not alone, not entirely. I hired help for the electrical and the plumbing, because I'm an engineer, not a fool, but I framed every wall. I laid the porch boards. I put in the fireplace, where Diane and I later stood our son, Ethan, in front of every Christmas photo for 18 years straight. Diane passed 6 years ago. Cancer, slow and cruel, the kind that gives you time to say goodbye and steals your strength to actually do it. After she died, this house stopped being a building and became something closer to a shrine. Every room had her handwriting somewhere. Literally, she used to write little notes on the inside of cabinet doors, grocery reminders, jokes. One that just said, "You're doing fine," that I found 8 months after she died, taped inside the pantry where I'd see it while making coffee. I tell you all this not for sympathy. I tell you this because you need to understand what this house meant before you understand what it took for someone to try to take it from me. 2 years after Diane passed, my son Ethan asked if he and his new wife could move in with me. Their apartment lease was ending, they were saving for a place of their own, and Ethan, sweet, soft-hearted Ethan, always trying to fix things that aren't broken, thought it would be good for me. Company, someone to cook again for. He wasn't wrong, not at first. His wife's name is Amanda. She's 29, sharp, ambitious, the kind of person who walks into a room and immediately starts rearranging the furniture in her head. I liked her in the beginning. I want to be honest about that. I liked her confidence. I mistook it for strength. I didn't yet understand that some people don't just want a seat at the table. They want the whole table. And eventually, they want you gone from the room entirely. It didn't happen all at once. That's the thing nobody tells you about losing your place somewhere. It's never a single moment. It's 100 small ones, stacked so gradually you don't notice the floor tilting until you're already sliding. It started with small decisions. Amanda repainted the guest bathroom without asking. Fine. It needed it. Then she reorganized the kitchen, and suddenly I couldn't find my own coffee mugs, the ones Diane and I bought on our honeymoon in 1989 because Amanda had boxed them up and put them in the garage to make room for a cohesive aesthetic. Then came the dinners. For 30 years, I sat at the head of the table. It's not vanity. It's just where the good light from the window hits, where Diane always wanted me sitting so she could see my face while we ate. One Tuesday, I came down for dinner, and Amanda was already sitting there. Ethan was at the side. My seat, my actual seat, had become the overflow chair, she called it, laughing, like it was a joke I was supposed to be in on. I let it go. I told myself I was being an old man about furniture. Then Amanda started referring to the house differently. Not your father's house, when she talked to her friends on the phone. I heard her more than once say our house. Not maliciously, maybe. Maybe she just started believing it. But beliefs like that don't stay quiet forever. They grow teeth. By the 8th month, she started making changes that weren't cosmetic anymore. She brought in a contractor to, quote, knocking down the wall between the kitchen and the dining room. My wall framed by my own hands. Without telling me until the contractor was standing in my kitchen with a tape measure. When I objected, she looked at me with genuine confusion, like I'd interrupted something that had nothing to do with me. It's just a wall, Walter, she said. She'd stopped calling me Dad around then, too. Small thing. Not small at all. I want to pause here and ask you something, because I think it matters. Have you ever watched someone take something from you so slowly that objecting to any single piece of it makes you look unreasonable? That's the trap. Any one complaint sounds petty. It's only when you step back and look at the whole pattern that you see what's actually happening. I saw the whole pattern, and I started planning. Here's what Amanda didn't know. Here's what, frankly, my own son didn't fully know either. When Diane and I bought this land in 1994, we didn't buy it as a couple in the simple sense most people assume. Diane's father, a cautious man who'd lost a business partner to a bad handshake deal decades earlier, insisted the property be held in a trust, the Whitfield Family Trust, with very specific, very old-fashioned language about succession. It wasn't romantic. It was smart. At the time, I found it almost insulting, like he didn't trust his own daughter's marriage. Diane told me to stop being proud and sign the paperwork because protecting something isn't the same as doubting it. She was right, as she almost always was. Under that trust, the house wasn't simply mine to hand over the moment I decided to be generous, and it certainly wasn't something that transferred by virtue of someone living in it, redecorating it, or announcing ownership at the dinner table. The trust named a successor trustee, me, until I chose otherwise, or until I passed, and it required a formal, notarized transfer for the deed to move to anyone else, not a conversation, not a feeling, a legal document witnessed and filed. Ethan knew there was some kind of trust thing from when he was younger, the way kids half remembered their parents' paperwork. He'd never read it. Why would he? His father was alive, healthy, and clearly still living in his own house. Amanda had never even heard of it. As far as she was concerned, this was simply the family house, ownership a formality that would eventually obviously land in her and Ethan's hands, probably sooner than later, if her behavior was any indication. So, when she stood in my kitchen, the kitchen with the wall she wanted torn down, the wall Diane used to lean against while doing crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings, and told me this house wasn't mine anymore, she wasn't stating a fact. She was making a prediction. And predictions, unlike deeds, don't hold up in court. I didn't correct her that day. I want you to understand why. If I'd pulled out the trust paperwork right then, in the heat of that moment, it would have become a fight about who's right. A shouting match. Ethan caught in the middle, forced to pick a side between his wife and his father, which is a position no son should ever be put in. I didn't want to win an argument. I wanted her to understand, permanently, without any room for reinterpretation later, exactly whose house this was. So I said, "Okay, Amanda." And I went upstairs, and I made a phone call to a man named Richard Kessler, who had been Diane's family lawyer for over 20 years, and who, as it turned out, still had every single document from 1994 sitting in a climate-controlled storage facility, complete and unbroken. Let me tell you what those 19 days actually looked like, because I think you'll find it more satisfying than you expect. There was no dramatic confrontation building in the background, no secret meetings in dark parking lots. It was quieter than that. Quieter, and in its own way, much colder. Day 1. I called Richard. He remembered the trust immediately. Lawyers like him remember everything. It's what you pay them for. and he pulled the original documents within 48 hours. Everything was exactly as Diane's father had structured it. Airtight, untouched by 29 years of assumptions. Day 4, Richard walked me through my options. I could formally reassert my position as sole trustee, which legally I already was, since nothing had ever changed, and issue a written notice reminding the household of the property's actual legal status. Or, and this is the option I chose, I could do something a little more permanent. I could begin the paperwork to transfer the trust successor position upon my death entirely to my granddaughter, Ethan and Amanda's 5-year-old daughter, Lily, with the house held in continued trust until she turned 25, managed by an independent trustee, not by Amanda, not even by Ethan, until Lily was old enough to understand what she was inheriting and why. I want to be honest with you, this wasn't only strategy. This was also, in a strange way, an act of love. I wasn't protecting the house from my son. I was protecting it for my granddaughter, from a pattern of thinking I didn't want inherited along with the property. Day 9, while Amanda continued planning her wall demolition, she'd since scheduled the contractor for a formal quote, moving forward as if the matter were already settled. I quietly had the entire property resurveyed and reappraised at my own expense, purely so the trust documentation would be airtight and current. No detail left for anyone to challenge later. Day 12. Ethan noticed I'd been on a lot of phone calls. He asked if everything was okay. I told him, truthfully, that I was getting some old paperwork in order. He didn't push. He trusts me. That trust, by the way, is exactly why I never wanted this to become a fight between him and his wife. He didn't deserve to be caught in it. Day 15. Amanda brought the contractor back for final measurements. I stood in the doorway and watched them measure my wall, and I said nothing, not out of weakness. Because by day 15, it genuinely didn't matter to me anymore what she thought she was measuring. Day 19. Richard called. Everything was finalized, filed, and, this part matters, formally recorded with the county, which meant it was now a matter of public record. Anyone could look it up, including, if she ever thought to check, Amanda. That evening, at dinner, in my seat, because I'd quietly started sitting in it again around day 10, and nobody had said a word, I set a manila folder on the table. I need you to picture this moment clearly, because it's the one I replay when I need, reminding that patience isn't weakness. It's a weapon, if you're willing to wait long enough to use it properly. Amanda looked at the folder like it might be an invoice for the contractor. Ethan looked at me with the particular confusion of a son who's about to learn something about his father he never expected to learn. I want to talk about the house, I said. Amanda smiled, that same smile from 19 days earlier, and said something like, finally being reasonable about it. I opened the folder. Inside were copies. The original 1994 trust documents, Diane's father's signature at the bottom, notarized and dated, the updated appraisal from day 9, and the newest document, the one Richard had just finalized, naming Lily as the trust's ultimate beneficiary, with an independent trustee managing the property until she came of age. This house, I said, has never belonged to me the way people assume. It belongs to a trust my father-in-law set up before some of you were even born. I've been the trustee for 29 years. As of 19 days ago, that trust has been updated. When I pass, this house doesn't go to Ethan. It doesn't go to Amanda. It goes into continued trust for Lily, managed independently, until she's 25. Silence. The specific kind of silence that happens when someone's entire mental model of the future collapses in real time. You can't do that, Amanda finally said. We live here. We've put money into this house. You've made cosmetic changes to a house you don't own. I said gently, I want to stress, gently, because there was no need to be cruel about it. Cruelty wasn't the point. Clarity was. Every improvement was made without my authorization, which legally was actually required. I let it slide because I didn't think it mattered who did the deciding. I was wrong about that. It clearly matters a great deal to you. Ethan hadn't said a word. When he finally spoke, it wasn't to me. He turned to Amanda and said quietly, "You told me your dad was fine with the wall." That was the moment I understood something I hadn't fully understood before. Amanda hadn't just been overstepping with me. She'd been managing what Ethan knew, shaping his understanding of the situation to keep him comfortable while she made decisions that were never hers to make. My reveal hadn't just clarified who owned the house. It had accidentally revealed something about their marriage that Ethan needed to see for himself. I didn't gloat. I didn't need to. I closed the folder, and I said, "Nobody's losing in their home tonight. You can stay as long as you want, as my family. But I needed you both to understand exactly what this house is and who it's for. It was never just a building to redecorate. It's the last thing your mother and I built together, Ethan, and it's the first thing I'm leaving your daughter. I won't pretend everything resolved cleanly because real life rarely does, and I think you'd see through it if I told you it did." Amanda was quiet for weeks. Not cold exactly, more like someone recalibrating. To her credit, and I want to give credit where it's due, she never again referred to the house as ours in that particular tone. The wall stayed up. The contractor was never called back. Ethan and I had a longer conversation a few days later, just the two of us on the back porch, the same porch I'd built boards for in 1996. He asked why I hadn't just told them both, plainly, months earlier, when the small thing started. I told him the truth, because plain conversations rarely change patterns that have already taken root. Sometimes people need to see the whole structure, the actual undeniable shape of a thing, before they'll believe it was ever there. Lily is 7 now. She doesn't know yet what waits for her in that trust, and she won't for a long time. But sometimes, when she's drawing on the kitchen table, the table by the window, in the good light, I think about the fact that this house will still be standing, still be in the family long after I'm gone. Not because I fought for it in the moment someone tried to take it, but because 31 years ago, two people who loved each other were careful enough and humble enough to protect something before they ever thought they'd need to. Amanda and I are not close, not the way I once hoped we might become, but we are at least honest with each other now. And honestly, I've come to believe that's worth more than the easy warmth we had before, because that warmth, it turns out, was built on a misunderstanding. If there's one thing I'd want you to take from this, it's this. You don't have to raise your voice to protect what's yours. You don't have to win the argument in the moment it happens. Sometimes the strongest thing you can do is stay quiet, stay patient, and let the truth arrive exactly when it needs to. Fully formed, undeniable, and entirely on your own terms. She said this house wasn't mine anymore. She had no idea it was never just mine to begin with. It was ours, Diane's and mine. And now, one day, it'll be Lily's. Some things, if you build them carefully enough, outlast every single person who ever tried to take them. If this story hit home for you, you're not alone. And there are more like it every week. Subscribe and let me know in the comments. Have you ever had to quietly protect something that was yours? I read every single one.